Welcome to Education in the Community. I am your host, the Reverend R.L. McKnight, and today we will be looking at the topic, the new Oakland, and we are honored, we're privileged to have with us as our very special guest, Mr. Jeffries, the proprietor of Jeffries Inner Circle. Welcome, sir, to the show.
Thank you, Reverend.
And a new venue, I'm calling it a new venue at Jeffries Inner Circle on Sunday nights beginning at 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then again during the middle of the week, Thursdays from 6 to 10 p.m. They have the live entertainment. And I saw a clip of this, some of the best music and singing that I have heard recently. And so we are going to share this with you for a couple of minutes. Jeffrey Pete. I was sitting here thinking, and the first time I came to Jeffrey's Inner Circle had to be in the early 90s, and the administrators and their assistants would meet there sometime on Friday after we left the job site. They would meet there. And I looked at it and I say, this really is an inner circle. It was like the who's who of Oakland as well as Berkeley. Everyone came on that Friday night. When I say everyone, there were so many familiar faces of what then we called the movers and the shakers. And this was it's between 1991 and 1995. Is this still the same venue at Jeffrey's Inner Circle?
No, Reverend, it differs from the standpoint that there's not as much public activity as there used to be. As you recall, at that time we were open Monday through Sunday, but we have a more limited schedule relative to being open to the public currently. You made mention of jazz on Sunday from 6 to 10, where we serve soul food, featuring Yancey Taylor Jazz Tet, phenomenal band. We paid tribute to Yancey Taylor not long ago. It's amazing. He had a clothing store, he and his father, on 14th and Broadway, and a friend of mine, Artist Taylor, who deals in vintage clothing, was approached by an archivist from KTVU and said that they had some old footage, which we played at the tribute of Yancey and his father. And the script went something to this extent: Haight-Ashbury and Polk Street don't have all the fashion. Fashion is also in the city of Oakland on 14th and Broadway. And that was some footage from 1968, and we played it. It was a marvel to see a young Yancey Taylor. But interestingly enough, and I think this is part and parcel of the topic that you made mention of, I think it was Duke Ellington who said that I'd rather be a lamppost in Harlem than the governor of Georgia. Well, that's analogous to Oakland at that time, because the Escobedos lived directly across the street from Yancey in West Oakland, Paul Silas down the street, the Pointer Sisters next door, and Larry Graham down the street. Bill Russell was his PE teacher at Hoover. I mean, that's in one block, and so I'd rather be a lamppost in West Oakland than the governor of Georgia, because it was so rich with culture, so rich. I mean, the thinking was you could throw a rock in Harlem and hit Langston Hughes or Paul Robeson or Fats Waller, so steeped in the tradition and the culture was it there, but the same held true in West Oakland.
Wow, that's very colorful. And there was some of this lingering for a while I found there at the Inner Circle on 14th Street. Every time, not every time, but many of these celebrities who would come to town, I don't know how they knew about Jeffrey's Inner Circle, but they found their way there. I recall that you had photographs on the wall of practically everyone that we admired in sports and entertainment. Some political personalities as well would come by. What attracted them to Jeffrey?
That's an interesting question. I often like to say that, yeah, we've had celebrities such as Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. They weren't there on the same night, thank goodness. But Robert Redford, Michael Jordan, Congressman Dellums and Congresswoman Lee, and a plethora of other congressmen and senators. Rich history, and it was the epicenter for culture.
Yes.
At that particular time in the city of Oakland. And we gave political fundraisers for a whole array of politicians. And as you indicated, a plethora of celebrities would patronize and frequent the venue.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have a venue that serves as an epic center today that will bring who's who together, that was a gathering place and a vineyard for the rich culture that we yet possess.
Well, that's not altogether so. We have Everett and Jones,
Everett and
who
Jones,
recently
thank you.
hosted a reception for Berry Gordy. The
Wow.
event was put on by Supervisor Keith Carson, Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson's office, and also Elaine Brown. Phenomenal event. And the venues that were chosen, the Joyce Gordon Gallery to host the press conference. Then they had the VIP reception at Everett and Jones. So there are vestiges of what were once some great thriving times in the city of Oakland. My father saw Nat King Cole on 7th Street. I mean, that's how great and that's how rich our history and how far back it goes. But individuals who are on the cutting edge, such as Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson, foster that same kind of dynamics that once existed. And to be there, it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Of course, it was marketing that Broadway play, Motown.
Yes.
But it was really rich. And so Everett and Jones plays a great role in hosting so many celebrities. In fact, when celebrities do come by there, their photos are taken and put on front of the menu. And they have John Madden, they had Al Davis, they had just a whole array of phenomenal individuals that go to Everett and Jones. So that's a shout out for you, Dorothy.
Yes, yes. And please forgive me, Dorothy, for overlooking that.
But that's not the only one, but that's one
Yeah.
that I'm particularly friendly with.
Yes, I am very familiar with Everett and Jones. Dorothy and my daughter are good friends. But also, what can we do? There's the New Oakland. I had a Rip Van Winkle experience. I absent myself, I guess, from the downtown area. And I went back recently, and then I went actually 3 times, twice for a meeting, and then as a tourist. And because I wasn't familiar with this New Oakland, I had been hearing about it First Friday, et cetera, and so forth. But I'd never come back in the city to see it. I didn't recognize it. Maybe gentrification is a term that best describes it. Can you tell me something about this New Oakland?
You made mention of Rip Van Winkle, who slept through a revolution.
Yeah, I think I slept through one.
You know, being born and raised in Berkeley, this city, at one time in this great city of ours, Berkeley, there were 34% black homeowners in this university town. That was phenomenal. And on Sacramento Street, one of the thoroughfares,
Yes, sir.
that was inundated with African-American businesses. My doctor was Dr. Joe Lewis and Dr. Sadler. They were on the same street on Alcatraz.
Yes.
Another doctor we had was Dr. Brown. He was on Ashby. Byron Rumford had his pharmacy and was the first black assembly person in Northern California. The Rumford Fair Housing Act, the Rumford Fair Employment Act. They had Don Barksdale, the first NBA All-Star, who was African American from Berkeley. He had a creamery right across from my uncle's, Reeves Records. They had Genevieve's hardware store, a lot of grocery stores. I was gainfully employed at the age of 6 and 7 selling Jets and Sun Reporters. And if I couldn't get them from Gene Hazard's mother, I'd go to Mr. Harville's grocery store on California Street. We had Pops, we had Buchanan's. It was a phenomenal place. Lois the Pie Queen had its genesis on Sacramento Street, as did the Post newspaper. So rich city, but now it only has 5% African Americans. And so you look at Oakland, and if you don't learn from history, you're destined to repeat it. Oakland once boasted a 50% African American population, and now it's down to 26. Conceivably, at the current trend, it will be down to 12% in the next 5 years. So gentrification, you use that term, and that's a popular term to describe our exodus from the inner city. But gentrification has a myriad of components. Just say in the entertainment business that I'm in, the city spent $100 million, $50 million over budget on the Fox Oakland. We don't even exist on the marquee. You don't see very many black acts at all. And that entity is a feeder for all the other restaurants and nightclubs, not for us, but for newcomers, if you will. And they have 9 bars in there. That's employment. They have the best sound system. The city is in the nightclub business now. They gave Yoshi's $5 million. Well, when you get those kind of loans, you can book people in advance. You can book Ahmed Jamal. You can book Nancy Wilson and give them the deposits. You can do your marketing when you get capitalized to that extent. And when you saw Jack London Village, you saw Sam's art gallery.
Yeah, Sam.
Phenomenal individual. Well, the Jack London Village housed the lion's share of African American tenants in Jack London Square. It got the wrecking ball because they promised us a 5-star hotel. It's been 15 years later, there's been no hotel, but all of those black business tenants have left. And when the city did land a TGIF, it wasn't long before they wanted to get rid of TGIF because it accommodated too many African Americans. In fact, the former head of the port was asked to close TGIFs, and he said, "I'm not closing the largest grossing TGIF in Northern California." But I'm just saying there's the trend, and it just isn't residential, but it has an entertainment component. And that's why we're trying to preserve the greatest art form that this country has, because Yoshi's, the greatest art form this country has is jazz. And during Yoshi's 10 years anniversary, they didn't have one African American on their 10-year CD. And so I say that to say we have to reverse that trend if we're going to call Oakland home as we once did.
Yes, you brought back some memories when you talked about Sacramento Street. I grew up, my formative years up until high school was in Berkeley. I even lived right behind Buchanan's store on Prince Street at one time. I remember the place where I wasn't allowed to go.
Stubby's pool hall and Walker's pool hall. Mr. Stubblefield lived right across the street from me, but he's also the deacon at North Oakland Baptist Church at 32nd and Linden.
Is that right?
That is correct. He bought a new drop top each year, would take us down to 7th Street. And we go in the Elks Club and the places where he'd get the receipts from the Coke machines and vending machines. He was a phenomenal individual, Mr. Stubblefield.
Yes. And then they had a place across the ramp. I think that was Adeline Harbor Homes. I had relatives that lived there, and we had to catch the bus to get across that ramp. And on the weekend, it was like Harlem. And you had a place, Esther's, Slim Jenkins, all of these, the Lincoln Theater. This was our Harlem. And by the time I came back from the military, it was gone. What happened? How did they? I know they ran BART straight through there. But what happened on the other side of the street?
BART and the post office. It's interesting. Former U.S. attorney and head of the Players Union, William Hunter, spoke before CalPAC, which is having its 38-year anniversary on the 28th. CalPAC, a consortium of African American owned liquor stores and restaurants and nightclubs. Well, William Hunter was a guest speaker, and he said he had an offer to attend USC Law School and Boat Hall. But when he was playing in the NFL and they'd come to Oakland, invariably they'd miss their flights because they were just so enthralled and amazed at the nightlife on 7th Street, juxtaposed to any place in the country where they went. They said 7th Street was bombed. And he said he made the decision to attend Boat Hall, juxtaposed to USC Law School, based on 7th Street. He said when he finally enrolled at Boat Hall, 7th Street was gone. So you said you went to the military, and so when he returned to the Bay Area, 7th Street was gone. With it, a multitude of jobs and real estate.
What happened to the people? I know some of them moved to East Oakland. The vast majority moved to East Oakland. Some stayed in West Oakland. But what happened to all those people that were there in that hall? Do you remember Harbor Homes?
Yes, I do.
What happened to all those people? I often think about that.
Well, I mentioned earlier
the whole community.
The Rumford Fair Housing Act. It was interesting because segregation enabled you to live next door to a doctor, a janitor, a mailman, Stubby's Pool Hall. We were one community. The insurance man came by your house, knocked on the door, and got his $1 a month or whatever the cost of insurance was at that particular time. And you went to the same churches and, of course, the same barbershops. Some of that is still the case. Mr. Reverend Allen talked about the segregated Sabbath, as you well know, and that's where the AME and the CME emanated from, because you couldn't integrate the Sabbath. But that's what segregation did. When we were able to move to the Hill area, or areas that were previously restricted to us, it decimated in a way, because when you take the best and the brightest, and best not by your academic achievement, but it takes a whole village to make up, or what am I saying? It takes a whole array of individuals to make up a community, to make up a village. And when you lost a great deal of those individuals, those slots now are being filled by a lot of others. And your community deteriorated in many instances when some of the stronger influences in that community left, because your teachers lived in your community. That's the only place we could live, in the black community, and that's why our presence was so substantial in the flatlands in Berkeley, to the tune of 34%. That's monumental. Some sizable real estate.
Yes, I remember you mentioned Bill Russell. When he left while he was attending the university, we lived for a while on 55th, right off of then Grove Street in the 50s. And Bill Russell lived on the corner. I'm trying to think, it was Grove Street, 58, one of those, right around the corner. And I remember when he signed his contract, he bought the biggest red Imperial I had ever seen in my life, and parked it right in his mother's front yard. And of course, they moved shortly thereafter. And the only other time I saw Bill Russell since then, that is personally, was in a store, and I reminded him of that, and he looked at me and he said, "You couldn't remember that." But Bill Russell was there. Frank Robertson went to Tech. We had people in the community.
That's the argument for I'd rather be a lamppost in West Oakland. What other community than the governor of Georgia, what other community could produce a Curt Flood, a Veda Pinson, a Frank Robinson?
Yes.
Reggie Jackson indicated that every baseball player should give 1% of their salary to the Curt Flood Foundation for the sacrifice that monumental man made to Major League Baseball, but also was a 7 times Golden Glove. That was at a time when Willie Mays was playing.
Yeah.
This was a phenomenal Oakland product, and we continue. Babe Ruth and Little League in Oakland was legendary. And let us not forget Joe Morgan and Rudy May, and a plethora of individuals that this community alone produced. That's an argument why you don't want gentrification, look how fertile this soil is. Look what we produce as a race in the city of Oakland. And newcomers have no sense of a history and are so vigorous and adamant about designing you out, but in the process, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so there's a vital argument to preserve and to nurture and develop and enhance the Black community in the city of Oakland because of the greatness that we can boast, not just locally, for the world to see.
For the world. And when we were growing up, I attended Berkeley High, but the school in the Tournament of Champions was always the School of Champions, which was McClymonds. There was a richness there at McClymonds High School.
The mighty, mighty Warriors. Absolutely, yeah. They were phenomenal. And they weren't by their lonesome, because there was Castlemont, there was Tech, there was Fremont, there was Oakland, and Skyline produced some phenomenal African-American athletes and intellects. And even non-African-American. I mean, Tom Hanks went to Skyline.
Yes,
Clint
did.
Eastwood attended and graduated from Castlemont.
I didn't know
I mean,
that.
shame on a dog that doesn't wag its own tail. Why wouldn't the city market? Any other airport in the country, you'd have Bill Russell, the leading winner of NBA championships in the world, and coach-wise and as a player. And not to boast him, not to wag your own tail, is Ricky Henderson, the baseball base stealer of all time, superseding that of Ty Cobb and Lou Brock. That's monumental. You'd want to have pictures of him making his record-breaking base stealing effort somewhere at the airport, showing it, runs and reruns. Who doesn't mark it? It's those who don't know. Wow. And that's why you have out-of-towners running the city, and for that reason they miss, I guess, biblically, to use it, when salt loses its savor, it's no longer salt. Oakland's no longer Oakland when you lose the key element, African Americans.
And we've lost that. I don't know. We have to look at the leadership that we have. I remember when we were the peak leadership politically in the city of Oakland, when we commanded the entertainment venue. I was young, but again, when I came home, they were still there. But shortly after I returned, there was a Reno club right there near 55th and Grove. Within walking distance was Don Barksdale Sportsman Club. And then you could drive or walk up on Telegraph, and there was the Showcase. I'm just talking about North Oakland. And they're gone.
They're gone. And the base, there's no more Army base. There's no shipyards. There's no Continental Cans. There's no cookies. There's no Granny Goose. Yeah. And that those were the jobs. There's no longer any General Motors. And that was the base for supporting.
Took us out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I'm at the point where I have to wrap up. I wish that I was writing this to put it in a book. No one has quite expressed the greatness and the richness of Oakland like you have in just 25 minutes. It makes one say, I'm proud to be from Oakland. I grew up here.
You should be.
And don't leave Oakland, but stay here. I want to thank you, Mr. Pete, for being with us today. And I do hope we'll have a chance to continue this conversation on the air or off the air. That's the story that needs to be told. I hope you recorded this program. And so until next time, on behalf of Mr. Jeffrey Pete and Jeffrey's Inner Circle there on 14th Street, right off of Broadway in Oakland, hope to see you there some Sunday between 6 and 10 or Thursday between 6 and 10. This is Reverend McKnight saying, see you next time.